About 2 years ago, I purchased several items from Hattons Model Railways in the UK. One of those items was an SCCR P-Class 060 tank locomotive in the Railway Operating Division paint scheme produced by Hattons themselves. I had always intended to install DCC and sound into this model, but I also wanted a current keeper or a stay alive installed as well. Let me show you how I installed these into this fantastic model. Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in. I had decided recently to bring the Hattons P-Class to the workbench for a DCC, sound, and a current keeper installation. This wasn't necessarily a difficult thing to do, but it took some planning to ensure a successful installation. I used an ESU Loksound 5 Nano decoder with the pre-wired board, a Scale Sound Systems micro-range speaker, it's 9mm by 11mm by 15mm, and a Tramfabriek, I think that's how you pronounce it, current keeper, specifically their SPP Nano current keeper. I didn't take any photos of the current keeper before the install, but this photo from the website should give you a good idea of what the size is. It's very small. You do need to solder both the caps together, and then solder that to the board it comes with, and then solder that to the decoder, but it was overall a very simple thing to put together and install. One of my goals for this whole project was to avoid milling the frame or removing any more weight than was really necessary. Under the shell on the fireman's side of the tank along the boiler is a small weight that is removable with a small screw. This feature seems to have been included for folks to install a tiny speaker in the tank on one side and a sound decoder on the other. It'd have to be a 6-pin if you do that. I decided against this setup and went with a plan similar to what you see on the UK site You Choose. This is a website that sells decoders, sound files, and they have DCC fitting guides for UK locomotives. And their guide on the P-Class says them using a now discontinued Zemo decoder and milling out the frame. And they put a sugar cube speaker in the cab, that's the setup I went with. That guide is from 2018 now, so I figured there's probably a different way, maybe a better way of doing this install. I figured I'd give it a try. For the decoder, a Loksound Nano made the most sense. Here you can see it next to the blanking plug, the 6-pin plug that comes with the locomotive to run on DC. The Loksound Nano is made with N-scale in mind, as far as I'm aware, and it's fitted with ESU's proprietary E24 connector. But the board it connects to makes it able to be used pretty much anywhere. This does make the decoder a little bit thicker, which negates some of the advantages of such a small footprint, but most of the wires on this board will be removed, which should help with the thickness issues. Honestly, thickness aside, the decoder fits incredibly well inside the shell in the small space it's going to be in. And a heads up that I actually desoldered the unneeded wires off the board rather than just cutting them, and this definitely helped with the thickness issue. Using the original wires from the locomotive's track pickups and the motor connections, I soldered these in place on the board, and I gave it a quick spin with the stock profile that comes with the decoder when you buy it blank. Well, that was very silly looking, but I think the performance was really good with just the decoder installed. While I waited for the current keeper to be delivered from the UK, I made some modifications to the shell. Holes were drilled on either side of the firebox door in the cab for the speaker wires to be fed through when the install was finished. Drilling the holes here helps keep the wires away from the exposed brass worm gear, and it helps hide the wires in the cab as well. I also saw an opportunity to add some extra weight in the hollow dome on the boiler, and I used a product called Liquid Gravity. It's a little steel BBs, very small, meant to fit anywhere there's extra space. And some PVA glue, some Elmer's glue, helps keep it in place. It's not a lot of extra bit of weight, but I think any bit helps, and this worked really well. Finally, after getting the current keeper installed and wired up, I wrapped both it and the Loksound decoder in Kapton tape to insulate them. I secured the decoder standing up on its side to the frame and against the motor. I also secured the current keeper and the speaker in the same way with the double-sided adhesive to the frame. And here's a look under the hood. The capacitors are stacked on each other, and the board sits at an angle on top of that stack, kind of like a house roof or something. This was the configuration that gave me the most room, and it is a bit of a tight fit, and if I milled the chassis out a little bit, I could probably fit it better, but honestly, once the shell is on, there's no issues, there's no bulging of the shell or anything like that. The last thing I needed to do was upload a sound file, and I ended up going with Wheel Tappers from the UK. They have a project, specifically their ROD version of the P-Class, and I think it sounds pretty good, but we'll hear that in a minute. The locomotive now weighs 4.3 ounces or 0.269 pounds. Unfortunately, I didn't weigh it before removing the extra weight and adding that liquid gravity in there and adding the decoder and everything, but there it is in case you're interested. Anywho, let's see how it performs and sounds with everything installed. And here's a quick test of the current keeper. I can get about 3 to 4 seconds with just sound, no movement. And here's a quick test with the current keeper. I can get about an extra 3 to 4 seconds if it's not moving, but picked up off the rails for some reason. When it is moving, I get an extra 1 to 2 seconds, which is really all I wanted and I'm very happy with. and I'm really happy with how this install went. The wheel tapper sound file is fantastic, and it really brings this little tank engine to life. The extra artillery and air siren sounds are fun too, if not a little bit silly, but I'm not sure how much I'd use them, but I'm sure the guys at the club will get a real kick out of it. The Tramfabriek SPP Nano current keeper does exactly what I was hoping for, an extra second or two of power, and that should really help getting over some rough spots or points with plastic frogs. Or the model itself I do love, and I'm glad Accurascale was able to continue to offer it to people, and I'm thinking about maybe grabbing a second one. Hattons had a real gem, and I'm glad I was able to get this one. Well, that's going to do it. Thank you for watching. This wasn't really much of a guide, but more of I wanted to show you how you could fit a decoder, a current keeper, and a speaker into one of these things, and how I did it. But maybe it will inspire some confidence into those who were maybe on the fence about installing sound into their Hattons P-Class or other small tank locomotives. It really just takes some careful planning. Well, that'll do it for this one, folks. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.